evening, everybody. The Springfield Town Library is pleased to host Michael Tougias, who will be presenting 400 Miles Down the Connecticut River. The presentation is sponsored by the Vermont Humanities through its Speakers Bureau. Michael is a New York Times bestselling author of 30 books for adults and 8 for children. Tougias' book, The Finest Hours, a true story of the Coast Guard's greatest rescue, was made into a Disney movie starring Chris Pine and Casey Affleck.
This first part of the river, has anybody been to the source? Oh, we've got 1, 2. Yeah, it's a great day trip. Quite a haul, but worth the trip. Way up on the Canadian border.
The second Connecticut lake.
Yes, Fourth Connecticut Lake. Yep. And people often say, okay, how long did it take you to do this trip? I did not do it in one journey, because that would have taken only maybe 7 or 8 days if you're in a kayak. I was doing it over a course of weekends because I was taking so many photos, taking notes. And what I wanted to do going back to River Days was combine a guidebook with an armchair read. And a lot of publishers were like, oh no, you have to do one or the other. And I'm like, why? Why can't you do both? The key would be put in 50 maps, and that way if somebody wants to paddle the river, they can see where the rapids are and the dams are. But if somebody just wants to go on the journey about some of the misadventures and some of the history of the area, they can go down the river as well. So finally, the publisher that I went with was the Appalachian Mountain Club. They had that same vision. So here we are at the source, Fourth Connecticut Lake, just on the U.S. side of the border. If you wanted to see it, you would park at the customs station, and then it's maybe a 40-minute hike up a steep hill to this little pond where it trickles out and the journey begins. Now, people say, oh, did you start canoeing there? And I said, no way, you would be dragging your canoe. It's so rocky and shallow. But it was interesting, the woman at the customs station, last time I was there, said, 2 guys dragged a canoe all the way up that big hill, 40 minutes, to do every single mile, and then they must have walked it down the beginning part of the river. So I give them credit. And it's just a beautiful waterway. Most of the land there is owned by the paper companies, and they leave what I call a beauty strip along the river where they don't log within a certain number of feet along the river. So it's a clean river, probably some of the best trout fishing in the east, this first 50 miles. And it's the first 50 miles that I do, maybe not all 50, but every single year I try to do at least 20 of it. That's my favorite section. I'll show you where the good canoeing, kayaking begins. But other people have used the book for biking the river or for taking drives along it and then doing all 400 miles down to Long Island Sound over a period of weekends. Beautiful trout. This is what I was after today, but the water was so discolored I didn't even have a hit on my fly or lure. But here, the brown trout, they take on a little bit of the colors of the fall. They get a few red dots on them, just like the brook trout. Whereas the rainbow trout, they spawn in the spring and they're most colorful then. People say, how did you get that picture? And I say, out my car window. And, had I opened the car, the moose probably would have taken off. But just carefully lowering the window and getting the shot. And many of these pictures date back to the days of old film, which I loved because you'd take the pictures, you'd mail them off, and you didn't know what you were getting. And so you had this feeling of anticipation getting them back, and sometimes you'd get a hit like this picture, and then other times you get a picture like this that I call the unicorn moose with the birch tree coming out of his head. But sadly, the moose population is way down because of the winter ticks. it's kind of hard to get your head around that something as small as a tick could bring down a moose, but in mass, they do. They basically kill the moose in mass. So where I would see up at the Porcupine in the Outhouse Cabin, see a moose once a summer, maybe 20 years ago. It's been 10 years now, I haven't seen a moose up there. So as you come out of that source, you're going to hit 3 other lakes, and these are man-made impoundments. And this one here is First Connecticut Lake. There is lodging there. This is a big one. You can rent a boat and motor around. And then this is a shot looking over Back Lake. I have a friend, he was, did very well. He became like the chief legal counsel at John Hancock, and he bought the most beautiful cabin on Back Lake. And so it's been a great place to meet him, and he's a big-time fly fisherman. I'm kind of an intermediate. And then we'll go in all different directions from here, either hiking, swimming, or fly fishing. And the loons, if you look closely, there's a chick on the one in the front. So they'll ride right on the mother's back, and if she dives down to get a fish, the loon will bob on the surface, the baby, and then when the mother comes back up, she'll crawl up the back for a ride. So they'll stay together, the male and the female, for a while. If you ever get up to the source, be sure to bring your passport, because you can't get into Canada now without a passport. And then drive about 2 or 3 miles north into Canada and look for this White House, and there'll be a sign down there, and it says Magnetic Hill. And you put your car in neutral, turn the engine off, and then slowly your car rolls right back up the hill. So it's the coolest thing. When my kids were little, I used to take them up there for the research and act like the magnetic force was pulling me up the hill. Anything to embarrass teenagers when they're, 13, 14. But they say it's an optical illusion, but from this angle, it certainly does look like you're looking down into a swale, the base of the hill where you park your car by that house. This is because I do too much writing and not enough upkeep on my home. This was on the way to Magnetic Hill. I love this house. So it was on a beautiful piece of land, though, overlooking, I think it was First Connecticut Lake. So, I'm not sure why someone hasn't bought this piece of land, because it's high on the ridge. You're looking down on the lake. But that's what happens when you do too much fishing and writing. So a little further down, you have Dixville Notch. Table Rock is that high one in the middle. And this little mountain range actually separates the Connecticut River watershed from the Androscoggin watershed. So if a drop of water lands on Table Rock, if it goes west, it goes into the Connecticut. If it goes east, it goes into the Androscoggin. And you can either hike up the hard way, right up that sheer face, I've done it both, or the easier way on the backside. And then when you're up there, this was taken from street level, but you're looking out at the balsams. And they've been undergoing an experiment to try to convert some to condominiums. It's not that operating, I don't think, as the grand resort it did before. So I mentioned, I tell you where the good canoeing starts, and I found it to be in West Stewartston, next to Colebrook, New Hampshire. You've now got enough water in the river to move you along where you're not getting out very often. And it's just a gorgeous stretch. So maybe this 20, 30 miles is where I keep coming back to over and over. My friend who took this picture said, it looks like you're in a bathtub, kind of like the one back here on the that I thought about sitting in for the presentation. But the key is you want a canoe that's lightweight. And so this Old Town pack canoe only weighs 31 pounds, so I can still get it up on top of the car. And friends, as they're getting older, they're moving towards, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, the inflatable pedal kayaks. So they're lightweight, they blow up with an electric pump, and then you pedal it rather than kayak, and they're incredibly stable. So it's on my radar, but not yet. And then using a kayak is more comfortable than a canoe because of the backrest, the double-bladed paddle, you go faster, you're a little bit lower to the water. And I took this picture of the 3 women zipping by me in my canoe because they could go faster. We're still heading south out of Colebrook. Stratford, New Hampshire is up there. And this was the first hazard, and I've heard it's changed in the last couple of years. This was the breached Lyman Dam, and it was tricky back in the day, you know, when I took these pictures, because as you're coming down the river, it's a good 2-foot drop there. You can't tell. It just looks, you know, like a little bit of white water, and you figure you can shoot over it. And I would always portage around. I knew about it. But one day, a canoeist was coming by, and he decided to run it, and he hit it just right, the right seam, and then he raised his paddle in victory and promptly capsized. So I helped him retrieve his stuff from the bottom of the pool, and down there was 2 or 3 other fishing rods, so other people had gone over. But I've heard that some of these cement slabs have since been removed, so it's not as hazardous. But I don't know myself because I haven't gone over this section in a few years. And there is it used to be very hard to find, but now on the New Hampshire side, there is a little sign in a dirt road where you could take a car pretty close to this big pool on the downside of the breached dam. Evidence of the logging days. They call this a logging crib, and you know it's filled with dirt. It's got the logs holding it all in one place. And what they would do is string cable from one crib to another and corral the logs all behind it. And then when they wanted to do the logging drive, they'd have them all in the river ready to go, just remove the cable, and then down they'd go. And most of the logs were heading towards Holyoke. That was the #1 paper manufacturing town in the United States for many years. It's fallen on hard times since then, but many of these towns are bringing back the mills, not as mill sites, but as places to work or condominiums, because the structures were built so well, the brick structures. And they needed natural light because they didn't have artificial light, so big openings for the windows, and people love that today, more natural light. On the Vermont side, little towns, even during the height of foliage season, barely anybody goes up this far, up to Guildhall and places further up on the river. Anybody recognize this farm? It's in some calendars. It's the Placey farm, and the river kind of makes a bend by it. And so you have the Green Mountains on one side, the Whites on the other, cows coming down to the waterway. And I spoke with these people who were biking by, and they said, we're doing an end-to-end trip, and we convinced the inn to bring our luggage to the next inn. And that's big now throughout Europe, biking end-to-end, where you're not, lugging all your supplies. They bring it on ahead of you. And now, in some of these difficult places, I was just through the Pyrenees in Spain. It's like the Rocky Mountains. Now, for people who need that extra boost, they've got e-bikes to help you up the steeper hills. So I put this slide in to confide in you that every now and then I cheated, because you can't paddle with your feet up. And I knew that when I hit these big impoundments, there's 18 dams on the river, and some of them form these giant lakes. And if the wind is coming out of the southwest, it's going to get the front of your canoe and keep trying to turn you. You'll make very slow progress. So I said, when I hit I think it's the Moore Reservoir, I'm going to use a little electric trolling motor on the back of the canoe. And it worked really well. You could mount it right on the back. You know, they make contraptions for everything now. And this went right across the back, and you could sit on that stern seat, and down you go with your feet up. And the round barns. And I used to think, oh, okay, the Shakers made those so you could put, the cattle feed in the middle, and they could access it from all sides. But when I gave this talk years ago in Newbury, Vermont, a woman said, no, they were built so the devil could have no corners to hide in. So I learned something new every presentation. And now we're down towards that Hanover area, and these grand homes on the New Hampshire side, they call this Bullfinch Row, beautiful rolling lawns going back. And this was the birthplace of Samuel Morey. So in River Days, I write about who invented the first steamboat. Was it Morey or Fulton? And all my research indicated it was Morey, but Fulton got the credit because his was commercially viable and he made all the money. And then as I started to read more and more eyewitness accounts, Fulton actually came up and visited Morey up here in Orford, New Hampshire. And you wonder if he didn't sneak, some of Morey's ideas out of there. We'll never know. But people say Morey sank one of his boats out of frustration in Lake Morey. And so this cliff is called the Palisades, and it separates the Connecticut River from Lake Morey, which would be on the left. And I think it's probably closed this time of year because they have nesting peregrine falcons. But then later in the summer, they open it up for hiking and the views. And if you look down at the river, it's discolored. And I was in the habit of, taking a tent with me in the canoe and not really knowing where I was going to set up. So usually I would make slower progress than I thought, but this day I made faster progress. So the original plan was to camp on an island, and luckily I made it all the way down to that church and camp behind that. And that night it poured, and the next day when I went to look for the island, just the tops of trees were showing. And I was thinking, oh man, that would have been a nightmare. In the middle of the night trying to pack up, get in the canoe, and get out of there. But the rainbow came out, and all was well. So you do pick up a little more boat traffic, because, you have Dartmouth College and the Outing Club, and you have a couple boat launches. And you've got the Wilder Dam. This is open to the public, so you can see. Now is a good time to visit it. You can see fish coming up the ladder. Inside is a viewing station. Big lamprey eel coming up. So the lamprey doesn't have a head like a normal eel. It's got this round suction cup of a mouth, spiraling tiny little teeth, and it'll latch on to a big fish, and it's a parasite, suck the blood from the fish. And it's using the glass to hold on to as it fights the current up the ladder. So in that book about growing up the waters between us, I talk about being in Longmeadow Brook, which fed into the Connecticut River. And I was looking for a trout, but I stepped on a lamprey and it coiled around my leg. Oh my God, you never saw a little kid run so fast. Remember the unicorn moose? Here's the unicorn human. Like a snake charmer coming out of the back of his head or the front of his head. And I would see beaver and I wouldn't see the beaver lodges. And I was like, why is that? And then I realized oftentimes they didn't need to make a lodge because they would just burrow right into the banks. On the Connecticut, in many places, the banks are really steep and it's hard to see wildlife because you're down low and you hear something run off, but you can't see it. And so the beavers, they're the same type of beaver that makes a beaver lodge, but they'll make their lodge right in the banks. These are trouble, mute swan. They're not a native bird to America. And boy, they've been multiplying in Massachusetts. They're everywhere. Very aggressive and bold birds. If you get too close in the spring, they'll come right at your canoe. This is more like it, a native bird, the osprey. So if you ever, you see a good-sized bird with a white head, it's hard to tell, is that an eagle or an osprey? Osprey are a little smaller, but they have that dark band along the side of their head. Whereas an adult bald eagle, the head will be pure white. So that's the dead giveaway besides the size. And oftentimes you'll see an eagle with a fish. The way they got the fish is they've harassed the osprey to drop their fish, and the eagle picks it up and off it goes because the eagle's bigger. Great success story with the bald eagles coming back in numbers. Great success story with the ospreys. I see them all along the ocean now. And it's largely from the banning of DDT many, many years ago. It would make the eggs kind of rubbery. And really, Rachel Carson is the person we have to thank for that. Her book was groundbreaking, and everybody questioned her, but she was a scientist. She knew what she was talking about, and she just also knew how to write and tell the story. So this was one that I was able to see wildlife from the canoe down low. Barred owls, unlike great horned owls who will fly away at your approach, oftentimes barred owls will just sit there, let you paddle right underneath them or walk by. That's the owl I see by far the most when I am up at the cabin. And they have a way of communicating, besides the hoo, 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 they can make all sorts of sounds. It's unreal to see two together at night communicating with these chortles. Some sound like laughter. It's really odd. Luna moth, but notice it's missing the long tail. It flew right through my campfire. And then I wondered, will this make it? And the next morning it was gone, so I assumed it could still fly, and it recovered. But a big part of it is with the comeback of the beaver, where the beaver make the beaver dams, they flood out an area, the trees get waterlogged and die, and that's the preferred nesting spot for great blue herons. It's up in these dead trees where they could spot a predator coming by, and it's usually coming up from a beaver pond. That's where you'll see the most great blue heron nests. Kind of prehistoric looking if you ever paddle beneath a whole colony. So we've just passed the White River, which is a wonderful place to kayak and explore on its own. I've paddled that several times and snorkeled a lot of the deep holes there. And then you're coming down past White River Junction, and these rocks will be in the river. And I use this as a warning during high water that up ahead is the Heartland Rapids. And during the spring, the river goes funneling through these rocks. So the locals told me that the names of these rocks are the chicken and the hens. The big one's the chicken, the little ones are the hens. And then here's what the Heartland Rapids look like during a drought. Normally the water would be just boiling over this, and you've got these ledges sticking up. And so what happens is your canoe hits a ledge, and the current then turns you sideways, and that's when trouble starts, when you're sideways. There is a passageway on the left there where that white water is to get through, but it's kind of tricky, so I always tell people, scout it out first, portage on the side. And then the beautiful covered bridge. This is the longest covered bridge east of the Mississippi, right here in Ascutney. And just a beautiful spot, a great spot for fishing. Fish like to stay out of the current because they'll let the food come to them and then they'll dash out and get it. So these guys are fishing behind the abutment. And then a few places I didn't know about. St. Gaudens National Historic Site. We're down in Cornish, New Hampshire. And I'd driven by here for years, never knew it was there. It's a beautiful place to go walking. He was a sculptor, so some of his sculptures are there, but these gorgeous trails, this one through the white birches, a lot of flowering plants. And then the fort at number 4. So this is not the original fort, it's a recreation of this colonial outpost, the farthest English outpost during the French and Indian Wars, the farthest one north, and was located near the Connecticut River. And a lot of great history here. One involves the rescue of Rogers Rangers after his attack on the St. Francis Indians during the French and Indian War, and the captivity of Susanna Johnson from the fort. So she was taken captive, and the dotted lines show the trail the natives were taking her on. And on day 2, she was pregnant, she has the baby, and you would figure, oh my God, the natives are going to knock her on the head because she can't keep up. But they want to bring her to Canada and trade her for money. There's a whole trade in captives going on by both sides. So they let Susanna and the baby ride the horse until everybody's so hungry they eat the horse. and then she said, oh, it was awful. She had to, walk, and the neighbor carried the baby, and then the baby fell into Otter Creek. And again, the natives let her neighbor, I forget who his names were, dive in and rescue the baby. And then I was wondering, why will her happiest day be Lake Champlain? Because then she knows, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump boat ride north. But it's that she knows she'll stop walking and they'll put her in a boat, which is what happened. So probably some of you have seen on the Reading-Cavendish line the little marker that Susanna put up in the spot where she had the baby, who she named Captive. I thought I had a picture of it, but I guess not. But it's on that border between Reading and Cavendish, and if you're heading north, it would be on the right-hand side. There are Native American petroglyphs at Bellows Falls, further down by the waterway. So we've hit the halfway mark, and I thought, oh boy, the river's going to be very different. There's going to be tons of people on it, but I found, still not many people use it except on the weekends. During the week, you pretty much had it to yourself. A lot of erosion here, and I thought, oh, it's because of all the rain and whatnot, but I think it's more because of all these dams. Some of them are hydroelectric. They're holding water back, then releasing it, holding it back. So the river's constantly fluctuating, eating away at the bank. This was my only bad experience on the river, where somebody in a boat, for some reason, didn't like me coming by in my canoe. So they took their boat right at me. I didn't think they could see me. I waved the paddle, and at the last minute, what they wanted to do was send a giant wave at me. So they turned the vessel. But I had taken the kayak on the ocean and knew, get your bow into the big waves, and managed to do that. And people go, oh, didn't you get the boat's license number? And I say, I barely had time to lift my middle finger, But all my other trips down the river were great. People would say, oh, you're doing a book, come over for dinner, or you can camp in our backyard, or here's a tip to see such and such. So one bad experience out of hundreds. So we're at the French King Bridge. We're into Massachusetts now. and we're looking north, so Vermont would be on the left, New Hampshire on the right. There is a sidewalk on this bridge, by the way, so if you're not in a hurry and you're going along Route 2, it's worth a stroll out there. And on the south side of the bridge, here's where the Millers River enters the Connecticut, one of the big tributaries. And then if you look straight down, it's interesting, you can see where the darker color of the Millers River is mingling with the more blue colors of the Connecticut at that bubble line. Because the Millers has so much tannin in the water, the vegetation. And this is also the deepest spot on the river. They think maybe 100 feet deep here in this one big pool. So at what we now call Turner's Falls, this was a huge Native American encampment through the eons because they could capture the salmon trying to get up the river and hitting the falls there. They called it the Great Falls. But it plays an important role in King Philip's War. So King Philip's War has just fascinated me. I've done 2 books on it. One is a historical novel called Until I Have No Country. It's a love story between 2 Native Americans caught up in the war. But this war occurred in 1675 to 1676 when the Wampanoags, the Nipmucs, the Narragansetts all rise up to try and get their land back. It's a little bit too little too late. But they're actually winning the war. It's a 14-month-long war. And on a per capita basis is the bloodiest war in America's history. More casualties in this war per capita than any other war we've ever been involved in. And wide-ranging, came up. Vermont wasn't settled by English at that time, but there was activity up here between Philip, whose native name was Metacom, and the Mohawks. But anyways, the battle that probably pivoted the war towards the side of the English was the Battle of Turner's Falls, when Captain Turner got volunteers to go hit this native encampment up at the falls, where, you know, natives could feel safe, rest, resupply between attacks. And so he was very daring. He led his people up from the south, curled around from the north, and then swept down from the north, the side the natives would least expect an attack from. Pretty much wipes out the village, but he still got to get back to safety down Hatfield, Northampton. And in Greenfield, some of the surviving natives catch up and kill Captain Turner. So he's killed on the retreat route. But it's such a disaster for the natives. They now don't have any safe place in southern New England to fight from. So they're moving up to the Abenakis, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and leaving their homeland in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. So the 350th anniversary of that war is next year, so I'm hoping it gets raised into people's consciousness, because I think because it's uncomfortable to talk about, we've swept it under the rug, because they never taught it to me when I went to school, and my town was heavily involved in it, and they just skipped right over it. But I think this 350th anniversary will get some attention. So then the English moved in at Turner's Falls and built their settlements there. It was a beautiful place with the 2 islands in the middle of the falls. And look at it now. Ugly. Hydroelectric dam obliterated the falls, and you think, oh God, this is it for the good parts of the Connecticut River. But just below it, you're back into this bucolic countryside because of eons of flooding here. The soil is really rich, really deep, so it's prime farmland. And this shot I took from the top of Mount Sugarloaf. So that's in South Deerfield, and you can drive to the top or hike. You get these great views. And there's a beautiful sycamore tree there in Sunderland. This one is on the east side of the river. Right after I took this picture of my friend by the tree, the woman whose property it was on came out, and I said, "Oh, you're so lucky to have this tree." And she goes, "Not in the fall." But it's the biggest sycamore I've seen. And you've still got some rapids on the river, so there's still some surprises. I figured, oh, it's going to be slow and deep and kind of dirty brown, but that wasn't the case. Almost looks like he can walk on water there, casting. Years ago, my son, maybe this is why he doesn't go fishing with me anymore. It's hard for me to tell if that's a smallmouth bass or a walleye. But we had some great trips going down the river, and we, just camp by the side and follow that practice of leave no trace. Take a swim, that's not me. But the river is swimmable. It's Class B, swimmable, fishable. The one time you don't want to swim would be on a day like today where it must have poured last night, because you're getting something called CSO that I'll talk about in a few slides. So the one time not to swim in the river is after a heavy rain. Satellite view looking down at the Oxbow in Northampton. So at one point the river went through that bow there, and then for whatever reason it made a straight path going between Mount Holyoke and I forgot that, Mount Tom. That's out of focus on purpose. It's the Connecticut River Loch Ness Monster coming up to attack my canoe. The librarian was telling me that the Bigfoot shows here do very well, so I had to capitalize on that with my own sighting of something strange. And I didn't rough it all the time. Every now and then I'd stay at an inn. This one was down in Hadley. It used to be an old stagecoach stop right next to the river, but because of flooding, they moved it back. And that area now, Hadley and a couple other towns, they've built huge dikes to prevent their towns from being flooded. But what happens is when the flooding occurs, it would hit the next town down without these big dikes. But I think we've got a good handle on the river, and I have a love-hate relationship with all the dams. They do help prevent flooding by holding the water back in impoundments and then letting it out gradually. And I think that's why Irene didn't do a number on the Connecticut River towns like it did in interior Vermont, but it is impeding the fish. They're having trouble getting over these fish ladders. Tobacco barns, when I was a kid, they were everywhere. That was like your summer job, was to pick tobacco down in places like Enfield, Connecticut. They hang it up there in the rafters, and then the slats are open on the side of the barn to let the air circulate. This is a dinosaur footprint. So there's a little park right next to the river on Route 5 on the west side of the river called I think it's Dinosaur Park, trustees of the reservation. So if you're driving by, take a spin and you'll see the tracks, a great place to take kids. If you want a better dinosaur experience, Rocky Hill, Connecticut has a big inside, they found in this one section of rock, hundreds of dinosaur footprints. So they've built the museum right over this big section of rock. So dinosaurs of every kind can be seen there. At Mount Holyoke, the Summit House, this was an old hotel, so you're looking off towards the Connecticut River. There were hotels on just about every good-sized mountain in New England. But over the course of time, if they caught on fire, there was never the firefighting apparatus to put it out, so we lost many. This one is now used as a visitor center. You can sit on the porch. But that was a big business. People would want to get out of, say, Springfield, Mass, away from the foul air, away from the disease, and get up to the cleaner air in the summer and stay at these mountaintop resorts. And they're up at the top having a picnic looking back north towards Amherst. This is one picture I did not take of a salmon trying to get up and over one of the falls. But the experiment to reintroduce the Atlantic salmon did not go as hoped. A few got up, but not many, and there's a lot of theories. Has the river gotten much warmer over the years? Can they make it through those fish ladders? I'm not certain that many do. Studies have shown on the Charles River even that the herring are having trouble getting over. But I think an even bigger issue is, yeah, some are getting up, but then the fingerlings, when they're trying to get back to the ocean, I think they're just sucked into the turbines. But I don't know this. So there are movements, I don't know about the Connecticut River, but on other rivers to take out dams. There was one taken out on the Penobscot. There's another one being taken out, being voted on the Ipswich River in Massachusetts, to let those anadromous fish go up and spawn in the fresh water like they're supposed to. I did not take this picture because I'm not that old to live in 1936, but there were big floods on the river before the dam. 1927, 1936 was devastating, and then the hurricane of 38. Those were the three biggies. So we're down in Northampton. So if you lived anywhere near the river, you got clobbered. You know, sandbags, trying to help. But look at the power of the river here. You know, normally a railroad trestle is 30, 40 feet above the river. Here the water's right at it. And you could see good-sized waves coming down the river. It must have been catastrophic. This is 1936. And then even in Springfield, that's looking over at West Springfield, totally flooded out. You could see people lined up on the bridge to see the damage. That's the Memorial Bridge with the big turrets on it. A beautiful bridge. They look like salt and pepper shakers. So this is what I meant by CSO. It's called combined sewage overflow. So you get a period of heavy rain. The sewage treatment plant is taking, you know, the runoff from the rain and the sewage all at once. It can't handle all of it. So you're getting it going around the sewage treatment plant because they can't handle it. And so you're getting direct discharges into the river. And so that's why in certain places they put up these signs to show that, you know, after a heavy rainfall, don't swim here because this is where the outflow pipe is. And this is a problem on many, many rivers where the sewer system is antiquated. And we need to separate where the sewage is from the street and the road runoff. I'm at the standing on the South End Bridge, looking down. That little Peter Pan boat used to give tour rides, but it had a fire. On that right-hand side is, do they call it, used to be Riverside Park. Is it Six Flags that runs it? But over there in Agawam. And then on the left is where I grew up, at the left of that picture. And we had this wonderful open space called the Meadows, Fanny Stebbins Wildlife Area. So that's where I basically grew up. In the waters between us, I describe how I was 11, my brother was 9, my father was a baker. So he'd go to work at 4:30 a.m. and we'd like, Dad, we want to, fish the Connecticut, so drop us off at the Meadows, and after grilling us for safety. He drops us off. Little do we know, it's still dark at 4:30. So we're sitting by the side of the road. We can't even walk to the river. And my brother goes, "What do we do?" And I said, "Eat our lunch." So there we were by the side of the river. But we had this wonderful day, and it just seems like kids don't do that anymore. Because then when my father got out of work, he picked us up at the same spot. But that day, looking back on it, seemed endless. All the different things that happened to these two boys rambling along the river and through the woods. And it just seems like magic. And when I fish rivers like today, I was up here all day fishing. I didn't see another soul. And back in the day, you'd see a few people out there. I call this picture Big Guy, Little Fish. That was the biggest fish we caught, because he grew up with me in Long Meadow, Mass., knew I was doing this book coming down through the area. And as you leave Long Meadow, you hit the remains of the Enfield Dam and the Enfield Rapids. So we're now into the final state, or near the end of our journey. They did build locks there to pull up barges to get around the rapids. This one is going over a little stream, so a horse would pull a barge up this canal. And they still have a ferry that runs from one side of the river to another. This is down, if you take grandkids or kids to that dinosaur museum at Rocky Hill, this is running there, so you can take the ferry across the river, and the driver. The big swing bridge, we're now down by Haddam, Deep River, Connecticut. So unlike most bridges that allow traffic to go by, the drawbridges go up, this one swings on the central support here and allows traffic to go up either side. So it's a novel idea. I talked to the bridge tender. I said, "Does it ever get stuck?" He goes, "Oh, yeah." I go, "What do you do?" He goes, "If I want to get home for dinner, I have to jump." And then the Goodspeed Opera House, nice story behind this. It was in disrepair, was going to be torn down, and people rallied round, raised the money, and fixed it up, and it's back in operation. So there's theater there. And then there's a castle on the river. This is Gillette Castle, open to the public. The guy, his last name was Gillette, he was the actor that played Sherlock Holmes at the Goodspeed Opera House. He made a lot of money and bought this whole ridge just south of the Opera House, bought it, built himself a castle, and then built a miniature train line to bring his guests up from the lowland up the hill to the castle. So he'd come down as the conductor and pick them up. And so today it's a public park, and you can stand out on the deck there and get these beautiful views. I'm looking down. The river this would be the area where it's starting to get tidal. So you're getting the influence of the brackish water. There's a big tour boat there. And there in the background you see the Opera House, the swing bridge, and the castle would be to the right, just off the picture. I like the clouds coming in. You're wondering, why are these people out there in winter? Well, they lead a tour looking for bald eagles, because the river's brackish here, it usually stays unfrozen, so the eagles like to congregate there to still catch fish, and you'll see them up in the trees. So you see what I mean? From the eagle is just bigger than the osprey, so from a distance, and the white tail is the other dead giveaway. The osprey doesn't have the all-white tail. Hot dogs. If you're paddling by, you can get lunch. And I paddled by and I was thinking, boy, what a tough way to make a living being stuck out here. But on a weekend, I came by, the place was jammed, a line of boats. And then I saw this mansion and thought maybe the hot dog guy owns it. But years ago, when I was a kid, you were told, don't go in the Connecticut River, it's filthy. And it was. And even prior to me being a kid, it was even dirtier. And they say it would change color from the dyes from all the mills. And you couldn't give away land along the river because it smelled. Whereas now, land along the river down here is worth a fortune because people can build a dock, keep their big boat safe, from the ocean storms, yet still get to the ocean. So you get the best of both worlds. Connecticut River Museum. This is in Essex. Inside, they've got a replica and a painting of what they think is the world's first submarine by Dr. Bushnell, hand-powered. The idea was sneak below a British warship and then with the drill on the top, sink the warship. Never did sink any warships, but he was able to stay underwater for a period of time. So that's why the claim is this was the first sub. I would not want to be the guy testing that. Look at the size of that striper. So they come all the way up to Holyoke. Some get up and over the Holyoke Dam. A few make it to Vermont. Another environmental success story, just 25, 30 years ago, I spent a lot of time out on the ocean. I just had a new book come out called The Power of Positive Fishing. It's about 30 years on the ocean with one friend going through the ups and downs of midlife in the waters, mostly off Cape Cod, Rhode Island. And 30 years ago, you couldn't catch a striper. It was just bluefish. But then we put the regulations in, and slowly the population has come back. And every year the regulations change depending on the stock of the young juvenile stripers coming up from Chesapeake Bay. So I think we've solved our problem of overfishing certain species because this year they've got the regulations are tougher than ever. To keep a fish, it has to be bigger than 28 inches, but smaller than 31 inches. So the big ones can reproduce, and the little ones can get bigger. So it's got to be right in that slot. So we've made it down to the ocean. You've got Old Saybrook, Old Lyme, beautiful homes. And the reason this wasn't developed like say the mouth of the Charles has Boston, the Hudson has New York, is there were so many sandbars here, the development went one river to the north, the Thames. And so the Nature Conservancy calls this whole area near the mouth one of the 10 great natural places in America because it's been protected. So if you're interested in some of the books that you can't get today, you can get them on my website, and if they're for grandkids, there's a way when you order to tell me how you want them inscribed. And look, everybody's reading Extreme Survival. It's my granddaughter, Robin. I was amazed that she could hold the book up. And she's a little older now, a few months older, and Kristen says, she's holding books up and just babbling away and turning the pages. And I go, poor kid, she's going to have to read all 30 of my books. Okay, she didn't read it cover to cover. So I'm going to close with a quote from Thoreau. This was in one of his journals. He said, "We are slow to realize water, the beauty and the magic of it." In other words, here in New England, we have so much water that we take it for granted, all the lakes, rivers, ponds. But he says water is magic, and I think he's right. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll take a couple questions, and then we'll do the book signing. Oh, it's, let's see. There it is. It's a tough name to spell. Was there a question or a comment? I could take them while we're doing the signing. Yes?
Did you portage around the dams or, okay.
Portage and timed my trip so I would end it there. And I quickly learned, bring a bicycle, because how am I gonna get back to my car?
In your book, do you tell how to portage around it, or is it?
As best I can. Some of them aren't as detailed, and it's been a few years since the book comes out, so a couple portages maybe have changed, but the river's pretty much the same.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So you took a bicycle on your kayak?
I would, well, I finally learned with the canoe, I could put the bicycle right in the canoe, but what I normally do is say, okay, I'm gonna take out here, put the bicycle down here, chain it to a tree, drive up, launch the canoe, do 10 miles, get out, bike back.
Oh,
You know, I'd see the river 4 times. Well, I hope you take a look at the books. I'd be happy to sign them. Makes great graduation gifts and Father's Day. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.